Greetings, friends. When it comes to the subject of the Jews, rather than comment on political, historical, and religious matters of which I am not well versed, I thought it would be better for me to simply recount the experiences I have had with Jews over the course of my life. As I give this account, I may offer comments which imply a certain opinion. I am, however, attempting to show that there is nuance. It is not a black or white matter for me. I hope you will understand what I mean by that as I tell my stories. The most I will say is that people completely lose their minds on this issue, and I mean on both sides, and that's not a good place to be. Now let us begin. I never knew any Jewish people growing up, though a few of them were around. To this day, to meet or even see Jewish people has been fairly uncommon. There is a Jewish part of Toronto around Bathurst and Lawrence, where you will see the Orthodox Jews, as I believe they're called, with their dress code, making them visible. But that's it. A Jewish lady was the principal of the junior school which I attended as a kid in the 1990s. I remember she was of small stature with dark hair and dark eyes and an accent. One morning, when we were in class, we heard her on the PA announcement system saying that she would be moving to Israel and bidding us all farewell. She said something about why moving to Israel was a special thing for her to do and that those were her people over there. Again, I don't know if I remember this exactly, but that's what I take from it. In all regards, an unimportant memory for me, if not for perhaps providing an anecdote or an illustration. In my early 20s, I worked part-time at a museum owned by a legal association. The curator, or my boss, was a middle-aged Jewess. I worked under her in close proximity for about a year. It was a small office space, a very narrow room, and a small house, an old mansion house. She was basically European in appearance, though she had the stereotypical nose. She was fairly intelligent, and as another guy that I knew who had worked under her described it, she could spot bullshit from a mile away. Meaning you didn't say things loosely, you didn't exaggerate anything when you were in her presence, because she would pick up on that right away. Generally, she was quiet, and there was little need to make conversation with her. She had a professional, if somewhat cold manner, with her eye on bigger positions, and she soon left that job for some other position in the government, or perhaps it was in the private sphere. I don't exactly remember, but it was something higher up in the managerial society. When I went to Ghana as a volunteer in 2010, which is in West Africa, I stayed at a compound with other international volunteers. Among them, one Brazilian Jew, a young man, and a Jewess from Windsor, Ontario, who was a landlady. The Brazilian guy told me about how he worked in Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, and how those two cities were essentially his home because he spent so much time commuting between the two places. He was just like a white guy, I guess from a Portuguese background, but maybe not, maybe from a Jewish Portuguese background. I don't know, but he was white. A lot of people in Brazil are actually white. He was laid back and he had a good sense of humor. At one point I remember he asked me, "Do you get the sense that people in this town are a little crazy?" And I said, "Yeah," and we had a good laugh. Good memories of this guy. I didn't get to know him that well. I was friends with him on Facebook. I don't really use Facebook in many years now. Now, when it comes to the landlady, Jewess, I actually befriended her, I guess because in that situation, she's from Canada at least. We have that in common, English speaker. There were some other weird international volunteers that the dynamics sort of, we didn't like them, and she particularly didn't like this French lady, and I didn't like the French lady because the French lady was totally full of herself. However, it ended up not being such a great idea to get too close to landlady Jewess, because she ended up to be kind of not the greatest person either. And I don't wish to get into all the details of what she was up to, but essentially she was interested in finding young African men to satisfy her desires. and she was interested in, I guess, using them to an extent, but they also, one in particular, used her as well. But that's a whole other crazy story. But this lady resembled a bull. She could be quite venomous and ferocious. She had a tendency to fight with people, verbally fight with people. I made the mistake of letting her have my email, and for years afterwards, I continued getting email after email from her. There were group emails about the need to support Israel. Eventually, I ended up cutting off all contact with her. So in 2012, I went to Peru doing the same sort of international volunteering, and you meet people, you travel with them, and this is how this young Jewish woman fell into the social circle. Like, I wasn't even really friends with her at all, but she was friends with someone else that I was friends with, and I don't really have much to say about her. She was fine. She was very tall, practically taller than me, and I'm 6 feet. Well, I mean, like, absolutely white. She was a brunette. She didn't have dark features at all. She was from probably a rich family. Culturally, she reminded me of what they would say, like Valley Girl back in the day. Or I mean, I don't know much about that stuff. But she wasn't like obnoxious or anything. She certainly was free in dating non-Jews. I had grown up in a house in Etobicoke, a suburb of Toronto. My mother had passed away in 2007, and the following year, my grandpa, who had been living with us, moved back to Latvia, which left only myself, my brother, and my father living in the house. We were later joined by his new Filipino wife, so then there were the four of us there, but there was pressure as the years went on to sell the house. My dad wanted to downsize. And in 2014, this process was about to be finalized. I mean, my dad owned the majority of the house, so it was his call. I owned a quarter of the house. I regretted the decision to sell the house, though obviously there were good reasons to do so. I just found it to be sad. The real estate agents, it was a married couple, were Jewish. I didn't choose them, my dad did. The guy was fine, no issue with him, he was just a white guy basically. The woman was not all right, as it turned out. She ended up being the worst stereotype in every regard. Pointiest nose, pale, clammy skin, dark, narrow eyes, messy, black hair. She was all nice on the outside, but business on the inside. Greed and coldness on the inside. Now, when I was in my 20s, I wasn't the best millennial, and I would smoke weed in my room out the window. Not a great example. And I didn't change my behavior just because these Jewish people wanted to sell our house. I tried to tone it down, but I guess on one occasion there was a lingering smell, and the agents picked up on that, which is of course bad for trying to sell the house. Fair enough, my mistake, my bad. I messed up. I didn't really want to sell the house though. That's not the best way to go about trying to do that, But she came up to me, that lady, either the following day or very soon afterwards, and found me in a room where I was isolated. There was no one else around, and she exploded on me in a hushed, but like yelling, but not trying to let the whole house hear, but with true venom. Don't smoke in the house. I don't even practically know this person, and I don't remember what I said to her, but I never forgot that. That left a real impression on me. That was the worst example. Obviously, I was in the wrong to a large extent, but the point was like how she went about it. You know, I realize it's your house. You've lived here for 28 years. Maybe I shouldn't just shout at you. Maybe I should try to explain from reason. Then it would have been completely different. But no, it was the entitled sense because what was speaking was the bottom line. The money. It's all about money. And I still had to sign a document to allow the sale of the house. And I seriously considered not doing it just to spite her. But in the end, I didn't think that was the best reason. I view the real estate industry as one of the lowest professions, regardless of what the ethnicity is of the person engaged in it. The reason I have this dislike for that industry is how it encourages perpetually the breakup of families from the land in which they have resided for so many years. Constantly changing your house is not good for our society or for our culture. We have bonds to the land in association with our family, and other people on the outside, whether from whatever tribe, whether from within our own tribe, break up those bonds. for selfish gain. Again, I said I wouldn't make this a polemic thing. Maybe I've gone too far. But we'll see some context here. We will see some context if you're getting a negative impression, because we fast forward to the COVID years. From May 2020 to around mid-2022, every Saturday, sometimes on Sundays as well, downtown, usually at Queen's Park, sometimes at Dundas Square, for these anti-lockdown and later anti-jab mandate events, and sometimes marches, and I got to know many, many people. I still have friendships which have endured since those years. Not with any Jewish people, but during that time I did have one Jewish acquaintance. There was another Jewish guy I got to know, but the first guy described himself as half Italian, half Jewish, but at other times he said he's just Jewish. He had Mediterranean appearance. He was a nice guy. His political leanings were more of a classical liberal, but he didn't like woke, and he would attend these like men's groups where they would talk about woke. So he would like Jordan Peterson and a lot of this new stuff, but essentially like a centrist or like not really right-wing. But at the same time, he was not offended when right-wing talking points would come up in conversation. I mean, he had to be of a certain temperament to be able to be there. But he would stand up for his Jewish people. He would probably believe most of the post-war consensus. He was pretty much laid back, and you could have conversations with him. And of course, the protests were supported by Rebel News, which was Jewish-owned by Ezra Levant. I remember one guy there, a tall, gangly, long, white-haired, white, hippie, bicycle-riding man who otherwise would have been European if I hadn't known that he was Jewish. I didn't get to know him very well. I remember his name was Cliff. At some point in conversation, someone mentioned the Jewish question or the conspiracy or the fact that there was a Jewish lobby in Western countries, a powerful Jewish lobby in Western countries, and without hesitation he said, yes, there is. And that didn't bother him. Around 2021, I started attending an Orthodox church. This is the same church I attend today. Over those years, I've gotten to know two people of Jewish ethnicity, of Jewish background, who are now Orthodox Christians, or I don't know if they were always Orthodox. I guess they were. I don't know actually. But they are Orthodox Christians of Jewish background in the church. One is the wife of a priest. She's a lady from New York. She has an American-sounding accent, or whatever a New York State accent would sound like. Very friendly lady. Very easy to engage in conversation. If she hadn't mentioned that she was Jewish, I would not have known. I would have recognized different facial features, but not in any sense indicating that she's not of a European background. The other person of Jewish background that I've gotten to know through the church is a man around my age, a tall guy, burly, with a very voluminous reddish beard. Likewise, a very overflowing, generous, and warm heart. He is entirely of European appearance, although perhaps he has specific features which might identify him as a European Jew, but I just don't have the knowledge to recognize these things. And as I mentioned, he's a very kind person, and he's an Orthodox Christian brother. I would not even recognize him as belonging to a different tribe. Hasta luego, amigos!